MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 14. Number Analysis. Someone else's body language affects our own body, which then creates an emotional echo that makes us feel accordingly. As Louis Armstrong sang, "When you're smiling, the whole world smiles with you." Louis Armstrong. If copying another's smile makes us feel happy, the emotion of the smiler has been transmitted via our body. Strange as it may sound, this theory states that emotions arise from our bodies. For example, our mood can be improved by simply lifting up the corners of our mouth. If people are asked to bite down on a pencil lengthwise, taking care not to let the pencil touch their lips, thus forcing the mouth into a smile-like shape, they judge cartoons funnier than if they have been asked to frown. The primacy of the body is sometimes summarized in the phrase "I must be afraid, because I'm running." MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 14. Number 01. For many people, ability refers to intellectual competence, so they want everything they do to reflect how smart they are: writing a brilliant legal brief, getting the highest grade on a test, writing elegant computer code, saying something exceptionally wise or witty in a conversation. You could also define ability in terms of a particular skill or talent, such as how well one plays the piano, learns a language, or serves a tennis ball. Some people focus on their ability to be attractive, entertaining, up on the latest trends, or to have the newest gadgets. However ability may be defined, a problem occurs when it is the sole determinant of one's self-worth. The performance becomes the only measure of the person, nothing else is taken into account. An outstanding performance means an outstanding person, an average performance means an average person. Period. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 14. Number 02. Restricting the number of items customers can buy boosts sales. Brian Wansink, professor of marketing at Cornell University, investigated the effectiveness of this tactic in 1998. Cornell University. Brian Wansink 1998. He persuaded 3 supermarkets in Sioux City, Iowa, to offer Camel's soup at a small discount, 79 cents rather than 89 cents. Iowa: Sioux City Campbell, 8979. The discounted soup was sold in one of 3 conditions: a control, where there was no limit on the volume of purchases, or 2 tests, where customers were limited to either 4 or 12 cans. 412. In the unlimited condition, shoppers bought 3.3 cans on average, whereas in the scarce condition, when there was a limit, they bought 5.3 on average. 3.3, 5.3. This suggests scarcity encourages sales. The findings are particularly strong because the test took place in a supermarket with genuine shoppers. It didn't rely on claimed data, nor was it held in a laboratory where consumers might behave differently. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 14. Number 03. Everything in the world around us was finished in the mind of its creator before it was started. The houses we live in, the cars we drive, and our clothing, all of these began with an idea. Each idea was then studied, refined, and perfected before the first nail was driven or the first piece of cloth was cut. Long before the idea was turned into a physical reality, the mind had clearly pictured the finished product. The human being designs his or her own future through much the same process. We begin with an idea about how the future will be. Over a period of time we refine and perfect the vision. Before long, our every thought, decision, and activity are all working in harmony to bring into existence what we have mentally concluded about the future. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 14. Number 04. Our homes aren't just ecosystems, they're unique ones, hosting species that are adapted to indoor environments and pushing evolution in new directions. Indoor microbes, insects, and rats have all evolved the ability to survive our chemical attacks, developing resistance to antibacterials, insecticides, and poisons. German cockroaches are known to have developed a distaste for glucose, which is commonly used as bait in roach traps. Some indoor insects, which have fewer opportunities to feed than their outdoor counterparts, seem to have developed the ability to survive when food is limited. Dunn and other ecologists have suggested that as the planet becomes more developed and more urban, more species will evolve the traits they need to thrive indoors. Dunn. Over a long enough time period, indoor living could drive our evolution, too. Perhaps my indoorsy self represents the future of humanity. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 14 Number 05. The demand for freshness can have hidden environmental costs. While freshness is now being used as a term in food marketing as part of a return to nature, the demand for year-round supplies of fresh produce such as soft fruit and exotic vegetables has led to the widespread use of hothouses in cold climates and increasing reliance on total quality control management by temperature control, use of pesticides and computer/satellite-based logistics. The demand for freshness has also contributed to concerns about food wastage. Use of best before, sell by and eat by labels has legally allowed institutional waste. Campaigners have exposed the scandal of overproduction and waste. Tristram Stewart, one of the global band of anti-waste campaigners, argues that, with freshly made sandwiches, over-ordering is standard practice across the retail sector to avoid the appearance of empty shelf space, leading to high volumes of waste when supply regularly exceeds demand. Tristram Stewart. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 14 Number 06. In the studies of Colin Cherry at the Massachusetts Institute for Technology back in the 1950s, his participants listened to voices in one ear at a time and then through both ears in an effort to determine whether we can listen to two people talk at the same time. 1950 Colin Cherry. One ear always contained a message that the listener had to repeat back, called shadowing, while the other ear included people speaking. Shadowing. The trick was to see if you could totally focus on the main message and also hear someone talking in your other ear. Cleverly, Cherry found it was impossible for his participants to know whether the message in the other ear was spoken by a man or woman, in English or another language, or was even comprised of real words at all. Cherry. In other words, people could not process two pieces of information at the same time. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 14 Number 07. One dynamic that can change dramatically in sport is the concept of the home field advantage, in which perceived demands and resources seem to play a role. Under normal circumstances, the home ground would appear to provide greater perceived resources, fans, home field, and so on. However, researchers Roy Baumeister and Andrew Steinhilber were among the first to point out that these competitive factors can change. Roy Baumeister, Andrew Steinhilber. For example, the success percentage for home teams in the final games of a playoff or World Series seems to drop. Fans can become part of the perceived demands rather than resources under those circumstances. This change in perception can also explain why a team that's struggling at the start of the year will often welcome a road trip to reduce perceived demands and pressures. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 14 Number 08. Some deep-sea organisms are known to use bioluminescence as a lure, to attract prey with a little glow imitating the movements of their favorite fish, or like fireflies, as a sexual attractant to find mates. While there are many possible evolutionary theories for the survival value of bioluminescence, one of the most fascinating is to create a cloak of invisibility. The color of almost all bioluminescent molecules is blue-green, the same color as the ocean above. By self-glowing blue-green, the creatures no longer cast a shadow or create a silhouette, especially when viewed from below against the brighter waters above. Rather, by glowing themselves, they can blend into the sparkles, reflections, and scattered blue-green glow of sunlight or moonlight. Thus, they are most likely making their own light not to see, but to be unseen. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 14 Number 09. Many evolutionary biologists argue that humans developed language for economic reason. We needed to trade, and we needed to establish trust in order to trade. Language is very handy when you are trying to conduct business with someone. 2 early humans could not only agree to trade 3 wooden bowls for 6 bunches of bananas but establish rules as well. 3.6. What wood was used for the bowls? Where did you get the bananas? That business deal would have been nearly impossible using only gestures and confusing noises, and carrying it out according to terms agreed upon creates a bond of trust. Language allows us to be specific, and this is where conversation plays a key role. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 14 Number 10. The last 2 decades of research on the science of learning have shown conclusively that we remember things better, and longer, if we discover them ourselves rather than being told them. 20. This is the teaching method practiced by physics professor Eric Mazur. Eric Mazur. He doesn't lecture in his classes at Harvard. Instead, he asks students difficult questions, based on their homework reading, that require them to pull together sources of information to solve a problem. Mazur doesn't give them the answer, instead, he asks the students to break off into small groups and discuss the problem among themselves. Mazur. Eventually, nearly everyone in the class gets the answer right, and the concepts stick with them because they had to find their own way to the answer. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 14 Number 11. It is common to assume that creativity concerns primarily the relation between actor, creator, and artifact, creation. However, from a socio-cultural standpoint, the creative act is never complete in the absence of a second position, that of an audience. 2. While the actor or creator him/herself is the first audience of the artifact being produced, this kind of distantiation can only be achieved by internalizing the perspective of others on one's work. This means that, in order to be an audience to your own creation, a history of interaction with others is needed. We exist in a social world that constantly confronts us with the view of the other. It is the view we include and blend into our own activity, including creative activity. This outside perspective is essential for creativity because it gives new meaning and value to the creative act and its product. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 14 Number 12. Scientists believe that the frog's ancestors were water-dwelling, fish-like animals. The first frogs and their relatives gained the ability to come out on land and enjoy the opportunities for food and shelter there. But they still kept many ties to the water. A frog's lungs do not work very well, and it gets part of its oxygen by breathing through its skin. But for this kind of breathing to work properly, the frog's skin must stay moist. And so the frog must remain near the water where it can take a dip every now and then to keep from drying out. Frogs must also lay their eggs in water, as their fish-like ancestors did. And eggs laid in the water must develop into water creatures, if they are to survive. For frogs, metamorphosis thus provides the bridge between the water-dwelling young forms and the land-dwelling adults. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 14 Number 13. Back in 1996, an American airline was faced with an interesting problem. 1996. At a time when most other airlines were losing money or going under, over 100 cities were begging the company to service their locations. 100. However, that's not the interesting part. What's interesting is that the company turned down over 95% of those offers and began serving only 4 new locations. 9.5. It turned down tremendous growth because company leadership had set an upper limit for growth. Sure, its executives wanted to grow each year, but they didn't want to grow too much. Unlike other famous companies, they wanted to set their own pace, one that could be sustained in the long term. By doing this, they established a safety margin for growth that helped them continue to thrive at a time when the other airlines were flailing. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 14 Number 14. We're often told that newborns and infants are comforted by rocking because this motion is similar to what they experienced in the womb, and that they must take comfort in this familiar feeling. This may be true, however, to date there are no convincing data that demonstrate a significant relationship between the amount of time a mother moves during pregnancy and her newborn's response to rocking. Just as likely is the idea that newborns come to associate gentle rocking with being fed. Parents understand that rocking quiets a newborn, and they very often provide gentle, repetitive movement during feeding. Since the appearance of food is a primary reinforcer, newborns may acquire a fondness for motion because they have been conditioned through a process of associative learning. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 14 Number 15. One of the main reasons that students may think they know the material, even when they don't, is that they mistake familiarity for understanding. Here is how it works. You read the chapter once, perhaps highlighting as you go. Then later, you read the chapter again, perhaps focusing on the highlighted material. As you read it over, the material is familiar because you remember it from before, and this familiarity might lead you to think, okay, I know that. The problem is that this feeling of familiarity is not necessarily equivalent to knowing the material and may be of no help when you have to come up with an answer on the exam. In fact, familiarity can often lead to errors on multiple choice exams because you might pick a choice that looks familiar, only to find later that it was something you had read, but it wasn't really the best answer to the question. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 14 Number 16. Say you normally go to a park to walk or work out. Maybe today you should choose a different park. Why? Well, who knows? Maybe it's because you need the connection to the different energy in the other park. Maybe you'll run into people there that you've never met before. You could make a new best friend simply by visiting a different park. You never know what great things will happen to you until you step outside the zone where you feel comfortable. If you're staying in your comfort zone and you're not pushing yourself past that same old energy, then you're not going to move forward on your path. By forcing yourself to do something different, you're awakening yourself on a spiritual level and you're forcing yourself to do something that will benefit you in the long run. As they say, variety is the spice of life. MTC. Good job.